Most people are walking around not even really knowing what they want. They just know what they don't want. Even for those who have gotten to that stage where they know what they want, if they haven't gotten, if they had not made sufficient progress along this path, then they will remember to put attention on that very infrequently. Usually at best once a day, but more often it'll be, like I said, like once a month. They'll be like, oh yeah, what was that thing I wanted? Oh yeah. Now, if you're far enough along on this path, then that might seem crazy to you because you might say, what? How could that be? But just check it out. Notice in your life in the past that that's been true. So you just were lulled to sleep and you basically became the status quo. There was no real you apart from the status quo. So you just became the status quo. You were basically asleep, which is shocking to realize, maybe, but it is the truth. If you really notice, you've been asleep almost your whole life, unless you're a very rare individual. But even when we think we're awake, most of us are asleep. And by asleep, what I mean is that you have no ability in that sleep state to actually choose anything because you're not really there. So on the one hand, unconsciously you're registering things. So I'm not saying that you couldn't recall what you did, on that first day of kindergarten or whatever. What I'm saying is that despite the fact that there was an unconscious registering of things happening, you were not conscious and present enough to make choices. Instead, it was all unconscious happenings. It was just reactions. So it was all based on the past. But because what you want is something new, that means that in order to accomplish that, you actually have to be present so that you can regularly put your attention on that so that you can create it, so you can call it forth. So this is why this requires this third essential, which we could call by many names. I'm going to call it conscious awareness. So I'm distinguishing conscious awareness from awareness in this context. I might use the terms differently at other times, but here for this talk, for this conversation, I'm using the term conscious awareness, and that's distinguished from mere awareness. So in this context, I would use the term awareness to refer to that registering of experience. So it's all being registered, but there's no volition exercised in that state. So now I'm talking about an active state of conscious awareness where you're awake and you have the ability to choose. So that's the third essential. And so it might seem to some people, they would say, well, I'm always consciously aware. And I would argue that probably not. If you're here, probably not. And so that's why I'm making this distinction to say, yes, of course, you can remember things, but merely remembering things does not mean that you were consciously aware. It just means that there was basic awareness, but that basic awareness is not necessarily conscious. You are mostly asleep most of the time. And so the goal here is to become awake, consciously aware, so that you can exercise your creative powers in order to achieve whatever it is that you want.